everybody. We are back with the second part of the How to Learn Jazz If You're Not Already a Jazz Player series. And so today we're talking about learning the grammar of jazz. If you haven't gone and watched the technique vocabulary video that I put together last time, go and do that now so you're familiar with some of this vocabulary. Today we're going to talk about applying this to tunes. So a lot of learning jazz is learning the repertoire of jazz, which means learning jazz standards. And I'll give you a link to some great jazz standards. There's hundreds and hundreds of tunes out there that are really worthy of learning. And so this is the second 15 minutes of your daily 45-minute practice session. If you only have a half an hour, make it 10 minutes. If you have an hour and a half, make it 30 minutes of your practice session. But this is the second of 3/3. So this part is going to be devoted to two things, essentially learning tunes and then how to apply some of the vocabulary that you've learned to these tunes and getting started with improvisation. So really quickly, when it comes to learning tunes, your goal is to learn these things by memory as quickly as possible. So when I'm learning tunes, I'll either try to learn it by ear, just play a great recording and copy it back, or if I am looking at a book or the set of chord changes, I'm going to try to turn away as fast as possible, even like the second or third time that I'm playing it, so that I'm not looking at it immediately. The goal should be to get it memorized as quickly as possible. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that we're going to do today, today we're going to be working with a really great standard tune called All of Me. I like using this tune because it's fun to play and it's not very difficult. There are not a lot of chord changes. I'm going to be using a great resource called iReal Pro. It's an app that's for Android and iPhone, and I've got it running here on my iPad. iReal Pro is great because it gives you a digital rhythm section in the palm of your hand, and it's really a wonderful practice tool. However, be really careful about how much you use that or really any other play along because it's not real. And one thing that it teaches people to do is not play great time. I think it's the best way you can learn how to play time is working with a metronome and working with a real live rhythm section or real live pianist, bassist, guitarist. Even just working in duos is great for your sense of time. So be careful that you're not the person that just sits in the practice room with iReal Pro on all the time. For the sake of today, I'm going to use it a little bit to show some stuff. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to play this tune, and I should just let you know what this tune sounds like. So I'm going to play the melody, and I'm going to embellish it a little bit because standard tunes, especially the way that you see them in fake books, are written as simply as possible. Right? They're often written in half notes and quarter notes. You don't want to play them the way that they're written, especially if, like this tune, it's originally a vocal song that comes from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, something that comes from Tin Pan Alley in New York or Broadway show tunes. These are tunes that were originally meant to be sung, and you don't want to deliver them perfectly straight. So do embellish these melodies. If it's a tune written by a jazz composer like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Freddie Hubbard, that may be a different story. You might want to play it much more closely the way you see it written. If you have questions about this, go to the recording. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of recordings of these standard tunes and some really great ones of all the jazz standards. So consult the recording first. That will tell you exactly what to do. So this is All of Me. thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to start practicing scales and arpeggios and digital patterns and approach tones over this tune. So all of the things that we've generally been working with. So just to give you a couple ideas, here's some scales, patterns, approach tones in various orders, and I'll just try to show how you use this over these chord changes and move on kind of quickly. Second half of the tune. The approach tone. Around the root of the chord. The next thing I'm going to do when I come back to the top is I'm going to do enclosures around the third of the chord, and then I'll do it a little bit around the seventh of the chord. So you're practicing all of these games over the chord changes of the tune. Here we go. So that's around the third. Let's do it over the seventh. And even over the nine. That should give you an idea of how to practice this kind of stuff, these technical patterns, applying them to a tune. You can do this with iReal Pro. You can also do it with a metronome. That works great as well. Any of these types of games work really nicely. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start improvising over this tune. And I'm going to show you a couple different, I call them improvisation games, because the whole idea here is to constrain your creativity. In other words, to take, rather than saying, play anything you want, ever. Any note's fine, any rhythm's fine, any inflection. We're going to try and squeeze that creativity down into a little box and then just explore every corner of that little piece of the world. And it's going to give you, it'll give you more opportunities to be creative, and it'll actually help develop the kind of thinking that we need to be a good jazz player. So the very basic game that I'm going to play first is it's called a phrasing game, and essentially I'm just limiting my phrasing. So I'm going to play 2 measures, and then I'm going to rest 2 measures, play 2 measures, and rest 2 measures, and then I'll show you some other elements of this phrasing game as we go. So here's the phrasing game. Again, I'm improvising for now, but you can also do this with patterns or anything else. Play 2, rest 2. Rest 2 and then play 2. So I'll rest the first 2. Now I'm going to play bars 2 and 3 out of every 4 bars. I'll have to let this one go because I missed it, but here we go. This is tricky. We're not used to making phrases like this. Now I'm going to play 1 and 4. So you get the idea. And, you know, along with this, I can also, I can make up any phrasing game that I would like, including things like playing 2, resting 3, playing 2 bars, resting 1.5. Anything like that, that you start dealing with odd phrase groupings instantly makes it more interesting for your listeners, and they won't figure out that you're playing a phrasing game. The really nice thing about this phrasing game, I think, is it gives you time to think and listen to the chord changes, which is really important for a jazz performer. A lot of people tend to try and play their way out of trouble when they can't hear the chord changes instead of just listening their way out of trouble. So this forces you to listen. It's also the best method I've ever found for learning how to keep your place in the changes and not getting lost. Okay, second game that we're going to play. This is a guide tone game. In other words, I'm going to treat my guide tones as thirds and sevenths of the chords. And so my goal is for this game, every time that a chord changes, I'm going to land on the third. That's my target note. So just give you a little taste for what that's like. I'll do thirds for the first 16 bars of the tune, and then I'll land on sevenths for the second 16 bars. And if you do it right, you'll actually make it feel natural, not like you're playing a very specific game. So you can do thirds, you can do sevenths, you can do ninths, you can start alternating them. And this game can also be layered on top of the phrasing game. So you can land on thirds while playing 2, resting 2. And again, it gives you time to think. All right, third game that I'm going to show you, it's called a Perpetual Motion game. And essentially, what you're doing is you're setting the rhythmic unit. The rhythmic unit is already decided for you. So in this case, I'm going to do 4 different things here. I'm going to start with half notes, play nothing but half notes. Then I'll play nothing but quarter notes, then nothing but eighth notes, and then nothing but triplets, which is actually really difficult. So here's the Perpetual Motion game. And again, you can layer this on top of everything else. triplets is actually pretty tricky. It's hard to do triplets for a long period of time, at least for me. Then you can also do 16th notes as well if you want to work on your double time playing. Again, it just constrains your rhythm so that all you have to think about is notes. And then, of course, you could do the same type of game where you pick a set rhythm and you just play that particular rhythm, like bop, boo, ba, doo, dot, dot, dot. And I actually get to pick my notes. So picking a rhythm. Another nice thing that you can do is you can sit and walk bass lines, and you don't need a recording to do that. So I'm just trying to hit roots on the downbeats and look for really nice smooth chord connection. All right, that'll give you a whole bunch of games to play over these tunes as you're learning them to get familiar with the changes. And there's many, many more, but I sense that this is starting to get on the long side, and I'm trying not to be too overwhelming here. So again, this part of your practice, part 2 of 3, and you're doing two things. You're applying the same technical things that you did before to actual tunes, and then you're working on improvising over the tune with some constraints. Just a couple quick caveats. At some point in this part of your practicing, just shut off your brain and improvise. Just play over this tune. And then the final thing is you can work on a tune a week, and that's a really, really nice way to learn new tunes. Maybe it'll take a tune every 2 weeks to start, just depending on how well you learn this stuff. But a tune a week is really very useful. So, all right, part 3 coming up soon, talking about listening and transcribing. Happy practicing.